Hey guys, Coach Sal here, episode 11 of the Thinking Body Revival. And today we're going to continue our discussion about this concept of timeline superiority and talk about two really gigantic figures in the field of, I would guess you'd call it sport, health, performance research, both South African, coincidentally. Ross Tucker, not to be confused with American podcaster and former NFL player and kind of NFL expert, if you will. Ross Tucker and Tim Noakes, both people that everyone should be familiar with, especially if you're in the field. But even if you're a recreational athlete and are interested in really making the most of your effort, I would say you should read everything by those two guys. Tim Noakes has kind of spanned the spectrum of different subjects from hydration, actually overhydration, which is an awesome book. We'll talk about that a little bit. I would recommend reading his autobiography because that'll give you some points at which you could go. You could go and kind of figure out what you want to read. You don't have to take my word for it, but he has such a broad scope to his career that there's a lot of things you could read that he's written. And Ross Tucker, more of a research guy, but again, writes stuff that's understandable to the masses and makes a lot of sense. So we're going to get going on that right away. You see my book of the week is Weightlifting by Bob Hoffman, one of the giants of the 40s and 50s in the world of exercise and health. And that's just a great book that, again, at some point we'll delve into. But for now, let's flip the clock and get to it. All right, everybody. So we're going to get into the discussion here between Ross Tucker and Tim Noakes. But again, it's interesting. Again, they're both South African, probably a generation apart, at least. I think Ross Tucker is probably younger than I, and Dr. Noakes is older than I. But they both bring a lot to the table, and again, incredibly interesting stuff, and fits in with our premise here that we're really not the best ever just because we're here. Tech that we have doesn't necessarily make us any better in any true physical improvement sense. Tucker is really all about pushing and finding our limits and using science to measure how we can do that. So he does use science in a way that's constructive and fits into our concept here that by knowing what the body can do, and coming up with the plan of attack and studying it, again, interval training, running hills. Once you get the idea for what works with the body, how the body responds to certain types of training, that is what you should do and be in touch with that. This concept of the wearables hasn't really done anything to improve us. It's actually, in many ways, removed our ability to be in touch with what we're doing and kind of figure out on our own, are we doing things at the proper intensity level? Again, once you've done intervals and you've pushed yourself, and once you've done hills and you have a plan of attack for how you want to train and what you're training for, that should be what drives your process, not a watch or another kind of wearable or a computer program or an app that you plug in parameters and it spits out a program for you. You have to develop those things on your own. And in that sense, it ties in a lot to the diet industry and why we have such a problem with diets in this world, not just in this country. But once you're following this externally generated program, whether it's a workout or a diet, you've lost touch with it and you don't really know what's best for you. And you have a harder time, coming up with a good plan and also following that plan. You're not only following a program that you yourself have not generated and have a stake in. Because you didn't generate the program, you're just going off of a script given to you by something else or that an app generated. You have no connection to it. So it's really the worst of both worlds. That's why diets fail, and I believe that's why a lot of these modern programs fail. Again, to repeat it, you don't need the gadgets as part of your daily routine. It's great once in a while to check yourself, or again, in the case of Tucker, he's used science to study the body and understand what works. But in the big picture, you don't need that in that science or that tech in your everyday pursuit. And where Tucker and Epstein kind of cross paths and make the same point is that most of our improvements in our performance have come from these advanced in tech outside of what the body is actually doing. It's from the track and the accessories and the equipment and the timing mechanisms that have been responsible for a huge part of what we look at as our improvement over time. Using the example of Jesse Owens versus Usain Bolt, going back from 1936 to the 2010s, right? That's a big chunk of the improvement we've seen in times in we're using the sprint as an example, but that you could look at across the board. A lot of those improvements have come from these improvements outside of what the body has actually become. Now, when you look at Tim Noakes, he has kind of really had a spectacular career, and he started as an expert, wrote this book, The Lore of Running, started as an expert as a running coach and a runner himself, and then encountered some physical problems that he says came as a result of him following the proper, I'm putting that in air quotes, the proper way to eat and train for marathon and ultra marathon competitions. He found himself to have all the negative health markers that he thought he was not going to have because he was exercising and eating the right way as far as he thought. And he has been a huge and one of the early proponents of the low carb, high fat diet, and even in the circumstances of competitive athletes, endurance athletes, which was and still is a very controversial subject. He also has written a fantastic book the book is called Waterlogged, and it does a fantastic job with research that shows overhydration is more of a threat and more of an issue, especially with the recreational level runners, than is dehydration. And it's meticulously researched, and he provides all of the data that backs up his positions. And the fact is that people drink too much water. Drink to thirst, it's called ad libitum, which is Latin, is really all you need to do. If you're eating properly or eating regularly and you're drinking to thirst, you will be hydrated. And there's no need to go through these ridiculous steps to make sure you're hydrated. With all the fluids these athletes take in, if cramping was caused by fluids, we wouldn't have any cramping with the amount of fluids these athletes are given. But we're going to go into that more in another show. When it comes to his training, he is a no gadget guy as well. He is a talk test guy. And the talk test is, if you want to be in that aerobic zone, can you carry on a conversation with someone? Again, someone is promoting being in touch with your body. And again, he's still considered, all these years after he broke on the scene with this well-researched book on both the diet and the hydration side, he's still considered a rebel in that he is not pushing this carb, and drink philosophy. And again, his sense is these modern contrivances that have affected our diet and our training have made us fragile. Instead of anti-fragile, we become less resilient, less robust in the face of a challenge, and we become more fragile. We have a harder time contending with the things that life throws at us, whether it's in competition or whether it's in life in general. Again, the diets, junk food, junk workouts, those things have all combined to make us less capable. So we can learn a lot from both what Tucker and Noakes have written about and have promoted. Again, I recommend picking up reading their books, research papers, and Ross Tucker has a podcast, The Science of Sport. Great information there. And you'll see why I'm a big fan of what they've been doing, because it fits so nicely into our philosophy here. So in thinking about these two guys and what they've accomplished, I think the role or the goal here, my role here, is to bring them to your attention. Two guys who have done a ton or committed to the field, not only research, but do themselves. And Noakes is a great example of someone who talks the talk and walks the walk. Tucker, again, involved with research, but also has worked with international level rugby programs. And rugby is an incredibly demanding and brutal sport that requires the highest level of fitness, strength, athleticism, you name it. The top level rugby guys have it. And if you're familiar at all with their training, it's brutal what they put themselves through. The game itself is brutal. And it's a great sport. And we have, again, Tucker involved in that in the research lab, comes up with his programs, and then brings it to the field and puts his research findings into work. And he's not putting guys in positions where tech is then carrying on what he wants to do in his training. He's finding out the real world conditions under which training should occur, and he's designing and implementing programs that allow players to do that, and he has shown great success there. My goal here is to bring these guys to your attention. What they've done, what they've said, what they've written is way more than I could possibly get across to you in this little 20, 25-minute show that we're doing here. It's to show there's a whole other side out there that most people don't get if you're following the current in social media craze, or if there's still publications that people read, or if it's websites where you go to get your information about recreational health and fitness or sport training. There's other people out there, and they're the quieter voice, or let's say they're being drowned out by the masses that have this other approach that's being shoved down our throat. And again, we've talked about it. It's everything from nutrition to these tech programs, training programs, to equipment-based training programs. One of the great things about Ross Tucker is he has taken, or he has done studies looking at VO2 max. That's the amount of how we use oxygen during competition, during our activities, and come up with a body weight exercise program that can increase your VO2 max, which is going to increase your performance in athletics. It doesn't matter what you do. We're going to talk more about that as we go, and I'm actually going to do a video of one of his workouts and show you how you can do that yourself. And that'll be a separate, that's going to be a separate issue or a separate edition from this show. But suffice to say, I want to repeat that because sometimes people latch on and they say, well, see, he uses tech, he needs tech, but he really doesn't. He is basically confirming what has been done and what we know, and probably fine-tuning it a bit. So tech has some role. It definitely is not a non-role or an undeniable role, but the role should not be 90% tech, 10% feel. It's both science and art. It's got to be more towards the middle, and I still say it's got to be more towards the art side of things than towards the science side of things when you're talking about training and recovery and how you're going to treat your body. And again, Noakes has taken his low-carb, high-fat diet and used it to train his runners and runners he works with, and has had success. Marathon, ultra-marathon, you name it. These pursuits that were formerly thought to be required or fueled by a high-carb diet. Turns out it doesn't have to be that way. So my message today is get out there and start doing things as they were done 100 years ago, 75 years ago, 50 years ago. I've given you enough information now that you have at your disposal methods by which you can do this. Sprint hills, do push-ups, do pull-ups, body weight squats, lunges, split squats, jump. Those are the things that will push your body. Remember from one of my first or second show, we did the sledgehammer. Incorporate the sledgehammer. Again, low tech, get your heart rate up, do full body work, do all these things that are going to improve your overall ability to live, to move, do things you need to do. Run, jump, get up off the ground, change levels, right? Squat, lunge, push, pull, bend, rotate, and brace. I would you got to have run in there. You have to have sprint or run in there and jump in there. Those are things that incorporate some of those 7 things I mentioned, but then add another dimension of intensity that we all need to get ourselves to be able to work at a higher level, live at a higher level. So again, my theme, old is gold. I said art and science. This has to be a mixture of art and science. You could also say it has to be a mixture of soul and science, right? You have to feel it yourself in order for you to be able to get the most out of your workout and to be able to be at your best. That's what I'm asking you to do is throw away your tech or put it aside. You don't have to throw it away. Get off the equipment and the machines at the gym and use those things as little as possible. If there is a way for you to do an exercise or a movement pattern without a machine, do it. Anything you can do in a machine, you could do it better out of a machine. So those are the things I'm going to ask you to do. That's your call to action. It's not to come and train with me right now. We've got people doing that, but I think we can make things better for more people if you just start to take some of this advice and put it into action for yourselves. And again, if you have kids, get them on this program. It's very easy based on what I showed you here in the last couple of weeks with the La Sierra Phys Ed program and your ability to go online and find those programs and those workouts. Get your kids involved in it. Don't depend on your school's Phys Ed program to do for your kid what we should want all our kids to have, which is this well-rounded, incredibly purposeful Phys Ed system, right? Which is going to make them better. There's more to being fit and healthy than playing a sport. If that was the case, we wouldn't have the problems we have. And of course, you can't neglect the diet. Get back to the non-processed food. Noakes talks about it. All of these top guys in the field and women in the field all know without a proper diet, none of this is going to matter. If you eat fast food and eating garbage, all the exercise in the world won't fix it. And as a matter of fact, you won't be able to do the things you want to do because you'll feel so lousy and you will be at such a diminished level for your well-being and from where you should be that you won't be able to push yourself the way you need to. All right, so that's it for today. You know where to find me, at Sal Marinello on X. You can email me at coachsal@proton.me. And pretty much any of the other platforms, just search for Coach Sal M, whether it's Instagram or Patreon, and you'll find me. All right? Get out there with your body weight stuff and sprint a little bit. Later.